Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure it's on game.
Okay, great. So you'll see.
Let's see, look,
I don't know, but he's on the list, so those are the accounts towards our town.
Tess, do you know if the CAO's?
He's like in a meeting, he's on, it's about. I think they're discussing.
Okay, so we have one,
We're just trying to see if we've got forums there, guys.
4, 5.
Okay, great. We're just looking for. I don't know. No, I haven't heard from her.
Yes, please do.
We'd like to go ahead and call us meeting to order. Thanks for being here. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them. It's also been received via email. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add? The items? Oh, I'm supposed to introduce Steve Edwards.
Okay.
Right off the bat. Well, so there's the wait till after the housekeeping and I guess we'll offer it. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Right, okay. The minutes also included in the agenda package reflect what was discussed last time. Anyone have any edits for the minutes? Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes for the last meeting? Thank you. Seconded, great. Opportunity for public comments.
I have no one in the room on Zoom and I don't see any other public.
Anyone? We'll dive straight into our delegations then. Thank you, Dawn, for joining us. Steve has a moment on the agenda, and I'll just wait until that time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Nice to be here. We've not met.
We met at the volunteer
We did.
appreciation dinner.
I'm very proud.
Nice to see you again.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm a retired broadcaster and in 2022, I started doing podcasts. And I called it Bowen Island Podcast. I did it out of self-defense so that I wouldn't have to run for council. And I would learn about who was running for council. I was surprised to check out the numbers last night. The podcast has had over 7,000 downloads since 2022. And last year, without any this year, without any new episodes, it's had 652 downloads, which I find quite amazing. So, anyways, it's a fun little passion project. And about a year ago, I thought it was probably time to do a podcast on emergency planning or what we would do in an emergency on Bowen. So I've put together a rough script and strategy to do a podcast. I sent a letter to council to advise them that I want to do the podcast. And essentially the podcast would be this, which is a great handout. And I'd like to get your help to put all of the voices that are dealing with emergency planning on the island. So I don't have a pitch, I don't have a presentation, but hopefully in a month or so, we'll have a podcast that can complement this work. So that's my story.
Great, I think it's a great initiative.
Yeah. We've already talked.
Yeah, I've talked to ESS, I've talked to Tess, we've talked, I would, just to give you a sense of what I would do, it would be an introduction to Bowen Island's emergency plan. We would talk about the risks on Bowen, who's who in emergency planning, reaching out to all of the different organizations that are involved in helping us. Maybe talk about Fire Smart, which I think is probably not a bad thing to do. The various tools that residents should have, and then recap podcast. Most of the podcasts that I've developed are about 30 minutes, which is designed to suit ferry schedule. So which may explain why the numbers are pretty good. So any help or any suggestions that you can lend would be appreciated. And I wanted you to be aware of it. Do it with your support and your help and go from there.
I'm trying to log into my agenda. Steph, can you, the resolution for council, refer it to us?
Mhm.
And I think, if I remembered correctly, the reasons for the resolution was, I think council needs to sanction it at some point.
No, that,
Or,
it wasn't, it came to council. My recollection of this, is John basically just went, presented a letter to council saying, hey, I'd like to do this. I'd like your support. And council, didn't know what to do with it, so referred it to committee, as one does. And the point being that the committee could say, yeah, we'll support, I'll join you, kind of thing, and help out along those lines.
So the wording from the regular council meeting, just for clarification, council discussed the proposal, agreed it's a good idea in principle, and that the emergency program executive committee should direct the municipality's involvement, and thus it's referred to us. So I think that, the general consensus that I'm getting from around the room is it's a good idea, and we're happy to support. I think this aligns with our public education initiatives. So absolutely, I would say certainly test is a great place to start and branch out from there. You're welcome to speak with whomever you'd like. We also have a BC ambulance representative on this committee. You have a fire department representative. So hopefully through us, you can connect with all the people that you need to, but I think
Process wise, what we've done is in the past is it's not great practice to have a recommendation or resolution right after a delegation, so maybe at the end, just after.
do we need a recommendation on this? From this committee?
I think because for me, sorry,
Yeah, that's all.
because it went to council, I would like a formal yes, support this is what I would be looking for. And that's actually in my, my thing. Yeah, because I think we do need it for. Yeah.
Sure, but let's wait.
Great.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so we'll add that under new business and
Thank you.
we'll hold the vote at that time, but so stick around.
The only question that came up from me in looking at the little evacuation brochure was, people are gonna start asking, where do I go? What's that?
The state room now.
He waved, that was he waved and went away.
People are going to ask where do I go, and so what's your question?
Well,
Sorry.
where's the evacuation route, but there's nothing in the plan to tell people. It tells them to follow directions at the time. At the time. Yeah, I'm not comfortable telling people you should go here because right now, I don't know that that's not where the fire is.
Yeah.
So if that, they have to follow the instructions at the time. Yeah. So but we do have evacuation sites. We have potential assembly points, we have potential marine evacuation points, but until the event happens, we don't know which ones of those we're going to activate. This is in the reception centers.
But if folks are interested in getting prepared or knowing what those sites might be in advance, they're certainly in have public access to.
I guess I was raising that as part of, putting the podcast going. Into saying, well, if we live out in Blue Water, they're suggesting being prepared to maybe go here, but it depends. I'm just raising that just because if it's evacuation planning, then that's something that people might be expecting in podcasts to do.
This has been a major conversation with NERC for the last 2 years. Because they say, what do we tell our neighbors? And pay attention to alertable, first responders. And if all else fails, this is the unofficial, go to the nearest water if it's a fire.
It's certainly situationally
Yes.
dependent, and it depends on things like the wind. If we're not being able to specify in advance, so I think we can direct people to the plan for guidance, and I'm sure that Don will give the best information that he has.
And that would be my purpose. Yeah, I think unfortunately, most people on the island don't know what to do. So this is very helpful, but everything we do is helpful to point them in the right direction. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Okay, Michael. Senior Manager Communications with those who are seeking us.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen here. All right, well, thank you very much for the invitation. Tess extended the invitation. Our crews were doing some shoreline protection work a couple months back. Tess came up to observe, and thought it'd be good for this committee to be aware of the work that we have done and continue to do on the island. So I prepared a presentation. It should be about 20 minutes. We're going to look at just an overview of this organization, and then we'll talk about our planning program for spills and the shoreline protection work that we do. And then some of the changes that are potentially coming to the Canadian regime. And then time for questions from the committee or I'd love to go on that podcast. Maybe you'll follow up with that. So quick history here. So this organization has been around since the mid-70s. It was at that time an industry co-op called Burrard Clean. There was a lot more refining capacity in Burrard Inlet at that time. So the main oil facilities combined their assets to go up. That changed with Exxon Valdez in '89 in Alaska. And as much as that was an American incident, it obviously was creating global attention. And the Canadian government decided that they needed to have a more formal plan for spill response, oil spill response. They made some changes to the Shipping Act in '93, which essentially required that industry fund response organizations to clean up oil on their behalf. And so that was the genesis for our switch from Burrard Clean to WCMRC, Western Canada Marine Response. We are the only Transport Canada certified response organization on the West Coast. There are 3 others on the East Coast at that time. So this is a national program. Spills, just for awareness, spills in the Arctic are still the jurisdiction of the Coast Guard. So there is no response for the Arctic yet. A lot of changes for us happened with Trans Mountain. I don't think I need to tell this room about that project. Massive increase in tanker traffic. So they approached us. They are one of our main members and wanted to know what they can do to mitigate response times during an incident. So we worked with them on new response standards, which I'll get to in a little bit. Then we had the Marathasa, again, pretty big incident. Well, not a huge spill, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, but a very big political incident. A lot of concern from municipalities and nations around their roles and the expectations of their roles in spills. And so out of that came these new integrated response plans, which I'll discuss again in a little bit here, which I think been a great initiative for the coast. 2017, we ordered our first vessel as part of the expansion, and then last year we commissioned our final vessel. So we are now officially up in full capacity for the Trans Mountain project. This graphic here shows what the Transport Canada response time standards are. We have a 6-hour window within the Port of Vancouver and in 1872 in the Strait of Georgia. And I'll go back to that in a second. So I talked about the industry funding. We've got 2,300 members. So essentially any large vessel so anything over 400 gross tons, it doesn't matter what the purpose of that vessel is. It could be a ferry, it could be a grain carrier, it could be a tanker. They must by law have a membership with us. And then oil handling facilities like Trans Mountain, like Suncor, like Parkland, we charge them essentially a toll on the volume of oil that they're shipping, and that goes to fund this response. So the Trans Mountain, so I talked about that 6-hour window in the port and 18 in the Strait of Georgia there. So Bowen would fall into that blue zone. We reduced those response times significantly because they just weren't good enough, to be frank. So we're down to a 2-hour maximum response in Vancouver, in the Port of Vancouver, and then a 6-hour essentially in the shipping lanes.
Now, as much as Bowen would fall in that 6-hour window, you're quite close to our response posture for Vancouver Harbor, so it'd be significantly less than a 6-hour response there. So to meet those new requirements, we had to build a number of new bases. Prior to this expansion, we had a facility at Shell in Vancouver and then a small warehouse in Duncan on the island. So these are all brand new bases that came online. Our Vancouver Harbor base is now staffed 24/7, just like a fire hall. The NIMO is sort of a main hub for the island, and then we have bases Port Alberni, Sydney, and Future Bay, and then also in the Fraser River. So the closest base to yourselves would be our Vancouver Harbor base. And I'd like to extend the invitation, if you're ever in Vancouver and would like a tour of our base there, let me know. We're always happy to do that. So it has 42 full-time staff, 26 vessels, and about 12,000 meters of wind. So fair amount of capacity there. And again, as I mentioned, there's vessels and folks there 24/7. Just a quick shot of that, what those look like. In the bottom right is the Vancouver Harbor. I'll go quickly through this just so you get a sense of the types of vessels. So this is the vessel that does the actual cleanup. This picture here shows you how that's done. Oil is actually funneled into those trap doors that have opened up on the water line there through that boom, and so that oil goes into those chambers, and skimmers, which are essentially brushes on conveyors, rotate through the oil. So that's the physical process for how it's removed. Lots of landing craft, larger close response vessels for heavier weather, boom skiffs, mini barges to transport oil, to shuttle oil, and then workboats. And most spills that we're involved in, even though we're designed for that big one, the lower the spills we see on the coast are smaller. And so if we are activated by Coast Guard, this is typically all we're needing, because it's maybe a 1 or 2 day incident that we're responding to. And then we do have a large offshore supply vessel that's stationed near Victoria and Future Bay. This has obviously it's very seaworthy. It's the biggest spill response boat in Canada, and it can hold oil as well as transport equipment. So it can hold about 1,000 tons. So it's key to for us to meet that 6-hour response window. And I should mention that those response windows aren't just to have one vessel on scene. It's to have enough equipment within the 2 hours of the 6 hours to handle a 2,500 ton spill initially. We've also, I'm not sure how much of a concern it is here, but certainly in and around the Victoria area and in Vancouver Harbor, lots of concerns about potential fires on container ships. The Zim Kingston was an incident that caused a lot of concern on Vancouver Island, where a container and a vessel caught on fire. There was actually water that interacted with water and caused the fire. So this asset can provide firefighting support if required, and it also has emergency capacity. And then we have response barges. You're not going to see these off the wall unless it's a big one, but we do have to meet those response requirements. There's skimming capacity, boom capacity, and storage capacity. So these meet that storage commitment. Spills are run through the incident command system. So if you've worked in a command post before, you'll be able to walk right into a spill response command post and understand the structure. And so it's ICS through and through. And we do tabletop exercises on an annual basis, and then we also do on water deployments as well. And that's part of our certification. So that's the process that you see there. So I talked about the Meredith Acid spill. So what came out of that was this Greater Vancouver Integrated Response Plan. It was a recommendation from the independent review of the spill, and one of the main lessons was challenges with communication, and there was challenges with understanding the rules and responsibilities, and then mainly because there was not any pre-planning done with folks on land. So federal spill response is a federal jurisdiction, and so it was managed by the Coast Guard and TC. And there wasn't any roles coming in for the first districts and whatnot. So since then, this plan spent a year bringing in all the municipalities in the Greater Vancouver area and nations of the province, and developed this new integrated response plan that continues. That document continues to exist. It's just been updated. And in fact, they're meeting tomorrow. The working group is meeting on this tomorrow, and there is a Bowen Island rep there. Carla is the name there. If anyone else wants to sit on those planning sessions on Coast Guard, I'm sure would welcome that. And those just for awareness of these plans have now actually expanded. Now there's one for Georgia Strait, one for Fuca, and one for the west side of Vancouver Island. So it's that Maritas bill has sort of triggered a sea change in how Coast Guard and response community plans for spills. And I think ideally they'd like that to be a nationwide, Canada-wide.
That's a question.
Absolutely.
I was just curious as to why North Van wasn't on that list.
Oh, it's just a sampling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's many more, Burnaby, New West, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so this is the planning program, this is the coastal response work that sort of primarily here to speak about. So our coastal response program essentially is based around the concept is that we can pre-identify areas on the coast that would be particularly sensitive to an oil spill. And if you look at that picture there, you can see that orange line of boom. So the idea is if that boom is put into place before the oil reaches that bay or that cove, then we've protected that particular area. So our program looks at identifying environmental sensitivity, so eelgrass seal haulouts, indigenous sensitivities, plant middens, grave sites, like any kind of cultural sensitivity, and then of course socioeconomic sensitivities as well. And so we did meet with Bonan staff, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, to help identify the sensitivities that helped inform some of the ERS that we have for Bonan. So this is an example of what that protection strategy looks like. This is for Palambi Bay. This is one of the strategies that were out sort of round truthing a couple of months ago. And this is it's a one-page document. It's very operational. There's a lot of background sort of data that goes into constructing these, but we don't need these on the operational side of things. So we're really just looking at, you know, what are we protecting, and where are we going to put those anchor points, and then what kind of equipment do we need to deploy that. So that you know, how much boom, how much you know, how many crews, et cetera, et cetera. So that really what we're wanting to do is A, cut down response times, and B, able to bring in response partners. So we don't necessarily have to deploy this. If we've trained someone, and we do have trained contractors on Bowen, if we've trained them to deploy this, they can do it on our behalf, or all more specialized vessels are tackling this site. So just some examples of folks in this program. We have Malahan, Aquagen, Chianu, RCM Star has become a new partner as well. And like I mentioned, there's a contractor on Bowen that's trained for that. Looks like I didn't include a slide here, but I will speak to it. The other piece of that program is we have 20-foot sea cans that have 1,700 feet of boom in them that we can put closer into communities. So we can put those, we have them throughout the Gulf Islands. I would love to have a spot on Bowen. So if anyone knows of a spot near the water that would be appropriate. Also, we can build them and put them on docks as well. So they can be tied up to a marina if there's space for us to deploy it. So maybe just an action item or a takeaway is if there's any spots that you're aware of that would work, please let me know. We were looking at a spot down by the marina there, but it ended up being just a bit too small for deployment purposes. So, but that's still very much a live program. Finally, for me, just for awareness, changes that are being proposed to the Canadian regime. The government would like to essentially expand the approach that they have for oil spill response to all marine pollution incidents. So they would like all large vessels to have a towing arrangement with someone ahead of time, firefighting arrangements, and salvage arrangements. They're also looking at introducing what's called in the States it's called a qualified individual. In Canada, they're proposing it to be a response coordinator, and that's essentially someone who works on behalf of the polluter or the vessel owner to manage the spill from the shore side. Right now, it's often put upon the vessel captain, the master of the vessel, and there's a lot for that person to be doing. They're managing, you know, an emergency, likely it could be a fire, it could be sinking, and then they're having to do all this stuff on the response side. So the idea is that they have to have someone that's trained in this, and probably in the ICS, that sits in those integrated response plans. So I think it's an overall a good approach. And then finally, the other thing is to add H&S, so hazardous and noxious substances. Basically, anything that's not oil that could spill into the ocean would now also fall under this new regime. And this is important, certainly in my mind. We're starting to see the shipping industry transition away from fossil fuels as propulsion. And Maersk, for example, has methanol-powered large container ships out there. There's talks to develop an ammonia-powered oil tanker. So an ammonia spill, maybe it's good for emissions, but ammonia spill would be way worse than an oil spill, right? It's the ocean. So there are not just hazardous noxious substance being transported as cargo, but also potentially as fuel down the road. So something to kind of keep track of. And that's my piece. So happy to take any questions that arose from that, or anything I didn't cover as part of that conversation.
Just a quick question. Funding, you said there's tolls. Is there also provincial and federal funding involved? So it's totally.
Yeah, entirely industry. There's in fact, that's such a big misconception out there that I'm going to be doing a bit of an education campaign this summer around that. A lot of people sometimes confuse our boats for Coast Guard boats or think that there's somehow taxpayer funded. No, it's not. There's no taxpayer money that goes to that. It's through those tools and that. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentations. Good stuff. You talked about the integrated plan and you're starting to bring in communities and that kind of thing, which is great. When you run your tabletops and you're on water exercises, you're bringing in or you're connecting with the OCs here and then the other municipalities. Are they taking part in those tabletops as well? Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Yeah. We I think we did invite one to the last tabletop that we had. It was for a scenario. It wouldn't have impacted Bowen, but it was for a scenario at the Chevron field on Vancouver Harbor. We invited both to sort of participate as sort of awareness, but any impacted municipality or nation will actually have a seat in the unified command, right? And then if there's EOCs, they should have the agency rep in the planning unit or wherever they want to have that. Right. Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's good.
So I remember one of the issues with the Mariposa was the delay in actually responding.
Yeah.
So if it was, so now you just go out if it's an incident, no matter.
No, so yeah, there's a very long delay between that time that was first reported and
Yeah.
the time that the Coast Guard tasked us.
Yeah,
So that was about 5 or 6 hours. And so that was where the delay was. Our response time was still our response time. They were there in 30 minutes and the oil was off the water in, I think, 18 hours. So yeah, it was the notification piece. And so now Coast Guard's tightened that up and are more diligent about assessing spills. But we don't self-activate, if you will. We need to be activated either by the Coast Guard or by the polluter. Is how we get it. So we're different than like a fire department or an ambulance in that way. We're not out looking for spills and making.
and so follow up to that then, if it was a spill from a fish boat, would Coast Guard activate you, or is that something?
So the way it works is that any oil on the water by law has to be reported to the Coast Guard. They will get those reports come in. They will then make an assessment if it's worth responding to. They could either decide it's just going to dissipate and it's not a big deal. They can they have their own assets, so they can respond. But also increasingly, we're seeing more business capacity and community capacity. So sometimes they might hire a contractor from the local marina or an indigenous nation to respond. So we're seeing less activations for ourselves for the smaller ones and more nation activations. There's been probably even in the last month, I'd say there's been 3 or 4 spills that have happened across the coast where we haven't had a role. But we are, and that's the way the system was built. We are really designed for those larger spills, but sometimes we won't.
Interested in your firefighting capabilities you discussed there a little bit. If we were to have some kind of a large fire in one of our marinas, could we call upon you guys for assistance in that, or?
In the marina, I don't think so. So that asset that has the fire capacity is in of each base, so it's a pretty significant, yeah, it's not, I don't think you'd be the go-to for.
Do you sign MOUs for that vote with other communities surrounding it?
No, the way it would work is that it'd be more, during an incident, because actually we lease that vessel from Kotag. So if there was an incident that needed firefighting support, we would release it from its responsibility to us, and then that vessel owner would hire it to do that work, yeah. Or failing that, the Coast Guard also has the authority to task vessels to do anything, yeah.
That's been waiting, so I'm just.
I just had a question. You said the Coast Guard or someone else calls you out? I mean,
The polluter.
oh, a polluter.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So it says there's the people that have to be members of our organization, by law, they should be activating us. But we also have the ability to sign like a third party agreement, for example. So like a marina here could hire us if they wanted to, so we can work for anyone. There's third party agreements that we have.
We have the potential of LNG tankers coming into House Sound.
Yeah.
Are you planning for that? Is that something within your jurisdiction?
So right now, the cargo would not be, but because of the size of the vessel and the bunker on board, we would likely be involved if there's an incident. So I'm not sure how much you've sort of delved into that world, but the cargo itself, if there was a rupture of a tank, essentially evaporates, right? So once that was safe, like if it went from a hot zone to a cold zone, and now we have the oil spill, then 100% we're going to be the ones happy with that. So, and even though some of those LNG carriers will run off the off gas, or they'll run using the fuel there, most of them still have bunker fuel on board. So the possibility of an oil spill does still exist.
Tell us how and when that local sensitivity data is updated?
Yeah. It's sort of like an evergreen process. They kind of rotate around. There's one person that does it for this area, one person does it for Vancouver Island. And they've got about 900 of them, and they kind of cycle through them, and they're building more all the time. So I'm gonna guess like it's every 3 or 4 years, maybe. But if there's interest in doing another session and updating information again, they're always keen to come out and do one. So we're happy to hold another workshop if there's interest.
That a public.
How did we do it last time? I think we got key people that might have knowledge. Yeah.
Others, environment, they came in the middle. I think at the time, struggling to remember, but.
I remember chatting with Bonnie about it very briefly years ago, but to this. If they thought, was Squamish Nation involved in that? I mean, are there sensitive?
Yeah, we have an Indigenous Relations Advisor who meets one-on-one with the nations.
Yeah.
And that's probably where like 95% of the community data is coming from now. Is the one-on-one workshops with different nations. So like Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, they've fed into our program. Yeah.
And a lot of that is not public knowledge.
Correct, yeah, so we have, so those, I should have mentioned this, actually, the protection strategies are publicly available on our coastal response site. So you can go into the map and you can click on, go into Bowen and see where we have protection strategies. And if a nation decides that they don't want that flag, we just turn it off, right? So if it's a culturally sensitive site that they don't want people digging around in, we just turn off that particular strategy, so it doesn't come up. And not, just because we know a site is sensitive, and doesn't mean there's going to be a strategy. If it is not suitable for a strategy, if it's really exposed, if it's very rocky and dangerous, if it's, the food's not going to hold, then we're not going to develop a strategy.
Cognizant of your request to the committee about sort of a CFAN spot near the water entrance, attempt to pass any kind of a resolution around that.
I think it would just be more.
Keep it in mind, I think. For those.
That's great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Michael. That was a good refresher for those of us who have
Yes.
learned this before and informative for.
Yeah, thank you. Always have very much.
And sending the presentation.
Sure, I'll just log out of there.
The presentation will get posted as part of the agenda package.
Great.
That's good.
And when is that, that new work, you mentioned the new federal strategy, sorry, I'm forgetting.
On the HNS and all that. So they released their first discussion paper last year, and we're still waiting to see the moving report, but I've been told for 5 years.
Not too.
No, and that's 4 to 5 years government, federal government. I can say that.
Okay. Oh, great, I see that Steve is next on the agenda to give us an update on the community fire smart and resiliency collaborative, and I also see that Steve's here online with us, so thanks, Steve.
Morning.
And we can hear you, that's excellent, thanks.
Excellent.
So for everyone's awareness, he's the new fire smart coordinator for Bowen Island, so welcome, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I look forward to just giving you a bit of a brief overview of the Fire Smart program on what we have going on right now on Bowen Island.
Excellent.
So I know that this committee has had a presentation from Louis Oriel from BA Blackwell and Associates. I won't dive too deep into the background and how the Fire Smart program in general was born and how it all came to be. But I did just want to talk a little bit about our kind of our building blocks or our foundational pieces for the program itself, which we call the 7 key disciplines for the program, and that being a sort of an education component, an emergency planning component, a vegetation management component, and a legislation component for the program. Also, development considerations play into Fire Smart, as well as interagency cooperation and a component of cross training as well, which is pretty pivotal. So the community wildfire resiliency plan that was generated from BA Blackwell for Bowen Island came about in 2021, 2022, and it came up with 46 sort of key recommendations for Bowen. Identified areas that we could incorporate the wildfire resiliency plan into our plan, and it used those key foundational pieces as sort of the topics and the things that we should focus on. So since I kind of came on to into the role of program coordinator on April 15th, that's sort of been where we've been targeting our actions within those 7 different disciplines. Again, that first one being education. So the key recommendations from Blackwell there were to begin by hiring a Fire Smart program coordinator here on island that could work in-house with the municipality, and that's how I came to be. So thank you for that. And it recommends making available home ignition zone assessments and information and resources to island residents and local businesses. And so we've been doing a pretty bang up job of that. We've been interacting with the public, and either by email or people have been walking in. We've been attending public events and sort of spreading the word. And I think just basically educating people on how to do a better job or things that they can do around their home. Because we've kind of targeted that as the most high yield of all of these. If we can get to the people, we can deal with wildfire risk in that level. But I did just want to touch on our library program. We've got a really great program through the Bowen Island Library that we're working on, as well as our local schools too, just to kind of educate our youth on wildfire and that. So both of these are funded through our grant program, and we're pretty excited about that. Legislation and planning, they recommended, Blackwell recommended that we strengthen Bowen Island Fire Rescue's enforcement authority to issue penalties and fines for hazardous fire conduct. And I think I believe Aaron can probably comment on that a little bit better, but I believe that has happened and is now in effect. And we essentially have the power to do that now, where maybe in the past we didn't. So that's, I think, a huge step forward for us, moving in the right direction for sure. Their recommendations on the development considerations were that we establish development permit areas for wildfire hazard, establishing requirements for exterior building design and finishing materials. So sort of taking a look at how our homes, maybe where our homes sit within developments that are coming into existence on the island, as we're seeing some of these new sort of subdivisions fill in areas. And then a little bit down from that is maybe how these homes are constructed and what the materials are that are going into them too. So sort of regulating that. Regulating is a strong word, but sort of outlining some guidelines for how that could come to be and what we could do on that end, you know? And then they recommended that we complete fire smart assessments on critical infrastructure here on the island and then implement high priority risk reduction recommendations based on those studies that we do. So that's something that in my short period of time here yet, we haven't made any ground on, but it's definitely on our radar and it's something that'll be part of the program and we'll be working on it. Interagency cooperation is a part of this for us too, based on the recommendations. And it is that the Emergency Management Committee should be used jointly as the Bowen Island Community Fire Smart Resilience Committee. They should be sort of essentially merged. And that's sort of what brings me here to you guys today. We're all going to be one and sharing information rather than duplicating resources maybe and just creating another committee and another meeting that maybe didn't need to be in existence. On the cross-training front, the recommendation was that Bowen Island Fire Rescue should participate in yearly cross-training meetings and tabletop exercises with BC Wildfire Service using wildland equipment. Now, I think, and again, I keep coming back to Aaron for this, but I know we do a pretty good job of quite regularly bringing out our wildfire equipment and training down at the hall with our members. But one thing that would be interesting to explore is maybe having some outside resources brought over to the island and incorporating that into some training exercises and scenarios. And I know that we have done some of that in the past here at Crippen Park, and we've had some success with that before. But it's interesting to see these scenarios play out with multiple agencies involved and different equipment and different people and, you know, the communication piece and getting that all to come together. So that again is on our radar. It's something that'll happen, you know, at a fire department level too. And then we'll involve Metro Parks, we'll involve some of these other agencies. So definitely some high yield there as well for our members. Emergency planning, completing and participating in regular testing of and updates to the Bowen Island evacuation plan. So that might be something that Tess could speak to a little bit more than I could there, but it is definitely got a fire smart component to it, right? Depending on the nature of our emergency here on the island and just exactly what's happening, there could be considerations there for sure. And then finally, and this is at the end of the list, but it's by no means the least important, it's vegetation management, the recommendation. And that is focusing on fire smart vegetation management through a combination of individual property assessments, which we're actively doing right now, and then whole neighborhood assessments on a slightly larger scale, as well as making things like vegetation debris disposal available to our island neighbors and how we can just kind of smooth the way and make it a little bit easier for people to kind of manage cleaning up their properties. Like, how do we go about doing that here on an island where maybe we don't have access to some of the things that are available on the mainland quite as easily, right? So these are all the things that we're actively working on with the program right now. And yeah, I feel like we're making some pretty great gains. Again, I came on the 15th of April, and it's been a little bit of a whirlwind since then, but some fantastic training opportunities have come up since then, and just a whole bunch of awareness, I think, has been raised. So we're going to continue on that front, and we're going to push on these 7 different aspects of the program, and I think we're going to see some good things happen.
A couple questions for you, Steve. I'll look at the
Sure.
cameras. But before we go, sorry, I realized that you're probably not known to all the members. Would you mind just introducing yourself now that you've done your presentation?
Sure.
And tell
Yeah,
us
yeah. My name's
a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Steve Edwards, and as of April 15th, I was hired on as the Fire Smart Program Coordinator here on Bowen Island. Yeah. So I kind of bring to that about let's see, 10 years, 15 years of fire service experience, partially in Squamish, and then about five years or so now with Bowen Island. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to work with Aaron and the rest of the team down at the fire hall. And get involved in all kinds of exercises and as well, I work here on Bowen as a paramedic for BC Ambulance directly across the street there. So really sort of a big focus for me on public safety and communication. And it's what I enjoy doing. So the opportunity to take on this role came up, and it was certainly not something that I could pass up on.
I think you're great for it, Steve. Really happy.
Oh, thank you.
Your background in construction is also helpful, I think, when you're talking to people about, building design. All the right skills. It's good to have you on board. Can you just, in 1 minute or so, tell me a little bit more about the library program and what you're doing in the schools?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the library program is it's pretty awesome. It is, again, it's a component of the Fire Smart program that is funded through our grant, our 2-year grant. It provides resources in terms of like these wonderful books, all age appropriate books from sort of kindergarten right through, I believe, age 8 to 10 years of age. There's about 10 or 15 different books. And I'm kind of particularly excited about this. What is her name now? Kelly Woods, our new youth program coordinator down the library there that's just been hired on. I'm working kind of closely with her, and we are going to integrate the books into the library, but rather than just sort of stuff them on the shelves where they're never found, we're gonna create a little bit of an educational program where we can kind of maybe either 1 book a week or a couple of books. We'll get some people together. We'll do a little bit of a presentation. We'll have a little bit of circle time, read some stories, and we'll educate some youth on what wildfire looks like, what it might look like in your community, what might happen, if there was a fire, what happens to the forest and the wildlife that exists in the fire when that happens. And so just sort of hitting it at a youth level, getting kids a little bit more educated, which I think will come home to the parents and find its way to the kitchen table, and that's just sort of one more way combined with the education piece up at the school that I think we can kind of hit it from a bunch of different angles and help get the message across.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Alice.
So you mentioned, under your programs, there is the individual properties. Now, what about the whole neighborhood assessment?
We have a couple of those actively taking place right now in a couple of different locations on Bowen Island. This refers to or can be used as we've got many stratified neighborhoods here on Bowen Island where entire neighbors have come together as a group and said, look, we live in this area right here, but we're a little bit concerned. We maybe have some common property that separates our homes in long driveways with wooded areas that lead into our properties, sort of thing, as part of our stratified areas. So is there anything available for us where we can have these areas looked at, assessed, and recommendations can be made for wildfire mitigation in those areas? And the answer is yes. There is the neighborhood assessment program, and we can come out and we can look at this. We can employ the Fire Smart BC guidelines, and we can, apply that template to it, have a look and make some solid recommendations. And then we can take it a step further and organize neighborhood groups that can all come together. And this is kind of where we're heading. Have a community cleanup day for dead sticks and branches and grasses and things that could provide fuel to bring a fire into that community and take it right to the structures and ignite a home potentially. So if we can clean those areas up and eliminate that and do it all within our grant program, I think we're going to be on the right track.
So the grant program right now does fund that,
It does.
so one just calls you to organize that?
Absolutely.
I noticed there's a form on the website as well, Steve, which I think is a good addition.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're quite right. There is. Yeah, there's multiple different, but I just want to underline the fact that, it could just be me and my technical logical challenges that I constantly battle with on a daily basis. But if that website becomes a little bit overwhelming, or the forms aren't making sense, or if you're not quite sure that you've clicked on the correct form and how to submit that or where it goes, a call or an email into me would be a great place to start. And I'll make sure that that's all getting filled out correctly and that we're on the right track.
Thank you. And then on the education front, we have a lot of people that are tree cutters. On
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Do they understand which tree is a fire smart hazard versus which tree is just a dead tree? And the
Oh, sorry to
difference, I
cut you
guess,
off. Go ahead.
the difference between, taking down something that's right near the road that is a real fire hazard versus taking down a dead tree that's 50, 60 feet in from a road.
Mhm.
Without a specific example,
Yeah.
Steve, are we providing education to the arborists on Bowen? And if not, is
Yeah.
there an opportunity to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it kind of leads to all the subheadings of education. We think of education, we think of kids, right? Or in this case, potentially some adults too, and property owners, and how they can do a better job around their yards and whatnot, right? But we've got other fronts that we're kind of moving on there in the education part of our program too. And that's, say, visitors to the island too, right? We're making people aware of what is and isn't a good idea to do, right? Like flicking a cigarette butt into the bushes, or coming over to Bowen for a day and having a beach fire or a little fire up in Crippen Park just to cook some lunch or something, we see these things happening. But another part of that would be local tree companies and businesses like that operate as arborists and are we should have them, and we will be getting them sort of familiar with our guidelines so that we're all kind of, pulling on the same end of the rope, if that makes sense.
And maybe like gardeners and landscapers and the garden.
You bet.
All sort of.
Yeah, well, you touched on another great part too. Like we do have within what exists within the Fire Smart program is sort of a landscaping plant program as well too. So there's an opportunity there to reach out to our local garden centers too and have them on board as plant partners. What's called a plant partner, and when they can actually sell for us fire resistant plants where people can kind of change the shape of their landscaping. So say like one of these property assessments was conducted and there were 5 recommendations made, and one of them was get rid of that cedar hedge that's right next to your home coming up against the windows, and maybe remove that juniper or something combustible like that and replace it with one of these other plants. Now we can offer them some options where they might be able to go and purchase one of those plants right here on Bowen from one of our local garden centers and incorporate it into their landscaping and actually apply under our grant program for some funding to do that.
Great, we look forward to those being rolled out. Yeah, go ahead, Alice.
My third question is, working with BC Hydro. They are terrified of cutting a tree down. So they just keep topping the trees along the sides of the road. And that all they do then is bush out and get closer to the ground where if somebody flicked a cigarette, then something starts in the grass, those trees. So working with them, so they actually just take the tree down that's under the hydro lines.
Mhm.
Keep topping them.
So is there an opportunity for you to collaborate with the BC Hydro's vegetation management team here on Bowen to sort of have that vegetation management be more aligned with perhaps fire smart goals and initiatives? I know that's work that they're undertaking elsewhere in the province. Is that something you could put on your radar?
You know what? That is a fantastic suggestion. To be totally honest and upfront with you, it is not something we've done yet, and I'd love to see a connection made with them and just see what kind of ground. I mean, I can certainly see we have to look at it from both sides, and we have to be considerate of everything. And I know there's a high cost involved with removing a tree right down to the ground, and all of that. And I can see Hydro's perspective of wanting to just limb back some branches and get them away from the wires and then be done with it, kind of thing. But you're quite right. What that leaves behind is a tree that completely changed the shape in the way that it grows, and it creates problems down the road. But I would like to look into that on my front. So why don't I put that on my list?
I can't speak to Hydro's perspective, but I know that fire smart work is going on around their assets all across the province.
Right.
The thing that I think that this committee, that might somehow align with your work well is that all those issues around design and development permit areas, and I still think there's a lot that the municipality does that isn't fire smart, whether it's encouraging wood in our critical infrastructure area in the cove, or encouraging safe access to communities where you don't have ease of egress. So I think there's that's the part I'd really like to see picked up with you here for this 2-year contract, because we haven't done anything about that of the 7 that has really been neglected previously.
Right.
So we have a planner here with us today at the committee meeting. He's like, oh, I was gonna say that.
Excellent.
So I think that there's a lot more room for collaboration.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on the list as well.
If anyone were to ask
I'd like to add to that. We're working on the new OCP. Have you started, are you coordinated with the OCP committee at all?
I'm on this steering committee.
Are you on the steering committee?
I am.
Yeah, I'm asking. Okay.
So that is important to me. We're gonna talk a little bit about the OCP later on in the meeting, Steve. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or I'd imagine Aaron can pass on anything relevant, but I think there's a lot of room for work to be done in that area. Does anyone else
Excellent. Yeah.
have thoughts on that particular topic?
I just made a note and started. We're having a meeting on Wednesday.
Okay, great.
Well,
Raise
raise
it.
that.
Great.
Part of that.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the update, Steve. I look forward to sort of hearing more about your progress as this committee meets in future. Will Steve be attending every meeting moving forward?
This committee is also.
Yeah, so we'll be seeing you regularly from here on.
Excellent. Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the update. Okay. So please to 5.2 emergency program coordinator. Exactly.
Are we exactly on time? Exactly. I'm so impressed. Okay, so I could not add this to the agenda due to the timing, but many of you already know. But I can now report that the 2025 application for the UBCM grant, the amount of $40,000 was approved.
Which grant?
The EOC, okay, 2025 EOC. This application includes a functional exercise, online EOC training, and funds to start assembling a mobile EOC to be hosted by Baltic.
Is that going to be available to other communities?
It will be deployed. So I also have a 2025 budget update. There has been just for a little a $5,000 increase to the emergency program operating budget to include purchase of items to assemble 6 evacuation kits, which would cost $3,500, and 6 rapid damage assessment kits, cost $5,000. Between the time that the budget increase was requested and the final 2025 EOC grant eligibility was published, the RDA kits were actually included in the eligibility. So they were included in the application, which has now been approved. This is helpful as the $5,000 was not enough to accomplish assembling 6 of each kit.
The other budget piece that was on the spreadsheet, the full-scale exercises was not included in the final budget request for 2026. Also included as an increase to the operating budget is a call-out system such as Connect Rocket. Aaron and I have taken part in the demo for the Connect Rocket app, and we see a lot of applications where it can be used. In addition to EOC and ESS callouts, it includes a phone GPS locator for locating lost hikers. It can be used for staff notifications on various things. And we're looking at starting the trial, maybe perhaps later this month, and doing a trial piece on that.
And why isn't alertable suitable for?
Alertable does not do callouts. Well, it's learning something.
It's,
It failed the experiment. We did do some testing on it shortly after starting this position.
could you explain what that conversation is about you're having about
A
alertable?
call out system.
Sorry,
Oh, okay,
alertable's the public mass notification system, and I was asking why it wasn't acceptable that you could create a group within it for your, say, EOC staff and use alertable to, and Tessa said they tried that.
perfect, thank you.
So this is the increase to the operating budget is ultimately is a single Starlink subscription. And finally, for a budget update, EPC hours have been increased to full-time. This was published without an overall increase to the budget, as my hours had been split between the emergency program and the planning department. The planner one role has not been a very busy position over the last year or so, so my planning hours will be absorbed primarily by the planner one. This change is still in transition, so I'm finishing up on some of the more complex and longer term planning reviews, and I will remake on call to the planning department for the next year. So if they get busy, I will still be jumping in and going. But other than that,
Nice for the
Yeah.
emergency program.
Yeah.
Could we expect to see lots more productivity?
And so I'm just gonna remind you all how the spreadsheet is set up. On the left-hand column, not that one, the other one, it's this one, priority one, it's this one. The status update. So on the left-hand side, it's kind of categorized by grants, routine projects, and new things. So if I say R2, it is the second on the left-hand side, it will be routine, and it will be just the second R2 on the left. So and I will start with that. I will start with the R2, the NERPs. Both NERP co-leads have had to step down from their roles. NERPs are actively searching for new leadership. This is quite a blow to the NERPs, as it has been the lead volunteer group through its, has led the volunteer group through its revival. And although Wilma was not co-leader for as long, she was a highly dedicated volunteer.
I'd like to comment.
And
No, I'm,
Sorry, hold on.
okay, is this a time to talk about that?
We're gonna, okay, go ahead. It's okay.
I was just going to finish what I was
Oh.
saying about that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I was just saying their leadership will be sorely missed, and Edward has offered to work with any volunteers willing to take on the lead role.
Thank you.
Edward, go ahead.
Thanks for the kind words. I'm sorry I cut them off. One of the reasons I pulled out is that we've had some health issues. Sherry's had some health issues, which seem to be okay. No, in about 3 weeks. I haven't had anyone step up. But I am in a position where I can be a tad more active. And there are a couple people who said maybe next year. We need to keep NERP alive. I think it's been a very valuable program. So I will take the helm in a storm.
Excellent. You can't, it's like the Hotel California.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so next, under P3, so projects 3, the AED program. This was an action item for me to look into. So I did look into it. The AED program is specifically ownership of the existing devices and maintenance of them only, and does not include purchasing replacement devices. Just so that, just to clarify that. Unfortunately, but not unfortunately, just in addition to that, when I was researching into the program, it brought up a concern regarding BIM's liability and providing these AEDs to the public. And this was something that had come up before. Christie had requested legal counsel on the matter shortly before she left the position, but I don't believe it was ever brought to this committee. The recommendation from legal counsel was to develop a policy around providing community AEDs and how they are maintained, so that we have that as policy that has been adopted. We can also include signs on each device housing. Those were the two recommendations that they had. I think it is an important discussion for this committee to have to determine if I should start working on a policy and where it fits into my priority list. If the committee agrees to discuss, we can add it to the next meeting agenda, so we're not adding something to today. Another project. Under T7, public communication, the evacuation guide has been completed and mailed out. I'm still looking at creating a heat event trifold, so similar thing, but for heat and perhaps even smoke, wildfire smoke inhalation information as well. I have asked for estimates for costs and timing to design a brochure to see if it can fit in this year's budget.
It's driving that work. Like, are we getting questions from the public about our heat response? Or are we having, has anyone ever used the cold air shelter? Set it up?
Okay, so when I started this position, on my task list was finishing the response guideline, the extreme heat response guideline, and producing a one-page document for the public.
Okay.
So at the time, I had no time, so all I was able to do was a one sheet piece of paper like this, that kind of lists a few basic things that we do put on the counter during the winter, but it's not a good brochure that somebody will hold on to and actually read.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's what's driving.
So it was sitting on your desk when you started the job, but you're not sure why it was sitting on your desk? Like,
No,
what
it's
drove that?
Heat response or cold
Heat response.
Heat response.
Guys just mentioned.
Winter, but she meant
Did I say winter?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Does anyone else have information on why this is a priority? Okay. Okay. I think it can go lower down the priority list.
We can move it down the
Like, for
priority
me, the
list.
policy around AEDs is more important than a heat event trifold, personally.
Can I back up to P5?
Oh, sorry, that's not one I added to
I
my
know, but it doesn't, the
hold on,
whole,
give me a
the
second.
whole of what you've written doesn't show up on the screen.
P5.
And so you can see it up there on the screen.
Can we finish the discussion about P?
Oh, sorry,
P5.
Which
one
is
are we
the-
on? Yes.
I was on P7.
Let's finish P7.
Yeah. So I've finished P7 and I'm ready to go on to I'm not finished P7. Okay, so the other piece is the public awareness education, which is part of my job description. I did create a PowerPoint presentation about evacuations for the wildfire emergency preparedness event. One of our EPC members, EPEC members, that attended the event suggested that it be posted on the website. As there's a lot more spoken information that it was what is on the slides, this would actually, to make it useful, it would require a little more work to do a voiceover on the existing presentation. It's just another public awareness project along with the podcast project that would be great to have completed before I get to the updating of the website if they are supported by the committee. So that's P7 is complete. All right, do we want me to go on or do we want to
Let's
back
go
up?
to Allison's question, sorry.
Okay, fine.
I just can't read what, all it says is vote on community that submitted the required, and then I can't read the rest of it.
On P5?
Unapplied, prior paperwork and leading on approval before they can provide.
Yeah.
There's no additional.
So there's something about
Things
this
are hidden.
basic.
It shouldn't have been there. That would have been from the previous. So that would have been from October 2024. So each column is a different month. So
I understand that, but if you're gonna provide information, it should be readable. Can you
yeah,
tell us what the
it
rest of
should not
says?
be. It should be.
Because it says no update, it's hard to understand what the history of this project
Okay,
is.
yeah.
So basically, the community health center kind of give out and locks them down, they're not getting paid to buy it or anything like that.
They had their application in for it, but they hadn't received anything yet. And I haven't gotten an update from them.
Can you read to us what that cell says on your screen?
Naloxone for relevance, they were 2,224 opioid-related deaths in BC in 2021, which is a record number. Opioid deaths include a high percentage of young, otherwise healthy individuals, and recreational drug use is rampant on Bowen Island. Emergency program continues to provide free naloxone to businesses in and around the Cove. Bowen Rec has reached out to BC Emergency Health Service to arrange naloxone training to community members. Christine Kumar has left Emergency Health Services and Gil Letter was not being achieved, and as such will be the role for this. Now there should be, let me make sure I have the right one. Oh no, that's November 2022. Sorry.
It's the one on today's spreadsheet that says.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Community health system.
unfortunately, I'm not sure how we got there. October 2020, they shouldn't have been part of, for October 2023, all I have is no work done on the project.
So I'm curious about how naloxone even got on the
Okay.
emergency program agenda in the first place, given that we have the health center, we have the pharmacy, we have a lot of health related organizations, we have the Orchard who's doing naloxone training, so I'd kind of like to see this taken off the list unless there's an argument for why you're spending time on this.
The health center didn't exist when it got on.
Okay, so they exist now.
They were gonna have
Are there any
really-
further actions?
Sorry, I've found the October 24th now, and I apologize that it was in that spreadsheet. It just says the Bowen Island Community Health Center has submitted the required paperwork and are waiting on approval so that they can provide kits.
Great,
So that was what they're.
so I think we'll call this not complete on our part, actually.
Yeah.
Get it off your list.
Perfect,
Thanks.
thank you.
I don't want to have this conversation again. But I appreciate that we stepped in when the health center wasn't there, so
Okay, so let's
it's
go
certainly
back.
important work, not trying to dismiss the importance of the law, so.
Can we go back, should we go back to my list now?
Yes, please,
Okay.
finish. Go ahead.
P9, official identification for BIM staff and volunteers. This is another one that was on the list before I started.
Okay.
This line was included when I started in the role, so I am not sure of the background and what was originally requested. ESS and NERPS currently have branded clothing items. NERPS have their vests and ESS has a wide variety of items. In the EOC, all EOC staff, regardless of what community they are from, are identified by section vests. I could purchase branded, BIM branded EOC t-shirts from the supplies and small equipment budget. It'd be at least $1,500. With the EOC shirts would have the BIM logo on the sleeve to distinguish a BIM staff member from someone from another community. But I am not sure that this is what the committee was looking for. And does this meet what the committee was?
Does anyone have any comments before I go?
Which one are we on? I'm sorry.
P9,
P9.
official identification for BIM staff. Up until now, I
Opinion, if you need clothes because you're in other EOCs and you want to be identified as BIM, I don't think that makes sense. Clothes for all the EOC staff for the EOC that we very irregularly activate, I don't understand this. I don't see this priority at all. Anyone
Okay.
else?
I'm happy to take that on.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Like, feel free if you need something for yourself, but to supply all the staff with emergency program branded clothes, it's just, I don't think that's a priority.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Okay,
Perhaps after an event to which we activate an EOC.
sorry, I.
No idea where that came. Okay, great.
Yeah, it was on it when I started, so.
Thank you, Jess. I appreciate the background. You're just automatic giving.
Well, especially when I don't know why it's
Whatever.
there. N3, public use of private property in an evacuation. This came up shortly after I started in the role, but so I looked into it. I requested legal counsel on this item. What happens if people are injured while using private property for an evacuation? And as counsel for BIM, our casual legal service does not advise private landowners, but they did mention that EDMA addresses the loss or damages to property, but does not address personal injury to members of the public using private property as an evacuation route. They also noted that we should be advised that questions about liability are inherently fact specific, and it is difficult to advise on a hypothetical scenario. A private landowner would need to seek their own legal advice.
Can you provide feedback to the government of British Columbia in, is there an opportunity anymore to say this may be somewhere that EDMA should address or could address in future, or maybe needs to? Is it silent on this for a reason?
There is, there used to be something, I'm gonna say good Samaritan legislation. Like people were reluctant to help anybody when they fell on the side of the street because they could get sued.
In this case, the landowner isn't necessarily even being a good Samaritan, though. They might not want us using their land and we might use it anyway in an emergency. So it's, I don't know that that would necessarily apply, but I see what you're saying.
With that, with the same, if that was, that would have, there'd be an emergency
Declaration,
declaration. Doesn't that override personal property?
Yeah, so the municipality could use the declaration of a state of local emergency to use that person's property for their purposes. I think that. Yeah, I won't speculate on what the legal implications of that are.
Okay.
I know we can do it.
Okay.
And I think the question was, if we do it and someone injures themselves, is the liability, is the homeowner liable? And I don't see how they could be if they haven't given you permission in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
But of course, I knew I'm a little bit.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So what,
Again, on the hypothetical.
what do you need on this?
Nothing, it was something that will come up, I am providing the information. That you can do,
Yeah, I don't think there's something.
so I can take that one off the list.
Great.
N6, the NERC kiosks, this was another action item. So the service contracts expired in 2022, but some of the keynotes from the agreements are, BIM has always owned this kiosk. NERC agreed to be responsible for general maintenance and updating the notice board with community information as appropriate. And BIM may undertake annual maintenance as associated with mitigation of safety risks on a project site. So no provisions were made for what would happen once those service agreements were ended. There was no agreements in place after that. BIM currently does not have capacity to take on the maintenance of the kiosks, but we also do not expect that they will need any maintenance for some time. My suggestion was to reevaluate the situation when kiosk maintenance is required.
Great.
When we made a collaborative arrangement, we thought we had insurance. So,
Yeah.
my directive to the nurse is don't pick up a tool.
Yeah.
And so are you,
I'm fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do we need a memorandum of understanding on that because the collaborative, we don't, okay,
No,
perfect.
no, the agreements are expired.
Okay.
There's no agreements in place, you have no.
Are all the kiosks on roll up,
They are on road allowance.
so we can take it down.
We could take, if,
If they become hazards, we can remove them. with-
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Then I guess.
so that's why my suggestion was just to reevaluate the system, the situation when maintenance comes up. Is it maintenance that is half an hour of work, or is it maintenance that this is falling over and is a safety hazard? So,
Yeah, so then in which case you just remove that.
Watching them build, I don't believe they're going to fall over.
Well, the wood rock out there has been in the ground for 20 years.
Seriously over-engineering.
They are seriously over it.
So you have a structural engineering evaluation.
Yes.
Okay, so again, N8, this was new, came up at the last meeting, looking for a Canadian alternative to Starlink. So last year's EOC grant included the purchase of 2 Starlink systems. One is fixed on the roof of the primary EOC, and one mobile unit is housed at the satellite fire hall. The monthly service subscription is $95 a month, which is now included in the 2025 budget. So I did find Galaxy. Galaxy had 2 quote options. One was $13,000 plus $135 a month for 50 gigabytes monthly data. The other one, which would be a fixed system, would be $18,500 with plans starting at $375 a month. So that was one option. The other option that I found was Trigo, which is an all-Canadian company, and the devices are made from US plants. So they're made here, but they're made from plants from the States. Those units are $650 for a small unit, small mobile satellite dish, plus you pay $250 for a prepaid subscription good for 1 year. You can buy as many as required, but each one is only 250 megabytes of data. So basically there isn't something that is going to provide the same kind of service that Starlink does for a similar price. But that would be
So you have the grant funding ready to go, you're ready to pull the trigger and buy these things, and you.
No, we purchased last year's 2024's grant purchased Starlink systems. So we already have them. But at the last meeting, I was requested to look into Canadian
Thank you for
alternatives.
looking into Canadian alternatives.
And we can just carry on.
I think we should. Does anyone wanna suggest that we move to one of those Canadian alternatives? No. Okay.
I will then we continue
Thank you.
as. Okay. And then, the other thing I wanted to bring up actually ties into the clean air spaces. So can I just kind of move from one to the next? No, the org chart is just, it was just there for your update. It's not something. So, wildfire smoke has been increasingly brought up as a serious concern. And, this week, or last week, Kieran actually, pardon?
The CAO.
Oh, sorry, the CAO requested that we look at a policy, wildfire smoke event policy, which would likely be similar to the extreme heat event
This is a policy for the municipality.
for the municipality.
And their operations or policy for the public?
It would be for the emergency program, how we are responding to heat event, or sorry, that's
So like a response plan.
The response.
See, okay.
And then on that same subject, I did the study, the community clean air spaces and air quality study that came up. It was offered to us when we were opening the new community center, and so I just sent in an inquiry asking if we could be included in that, which we could still be included in that. It includes air quality monitoring for 1 year and a community engagement tool. It would have a low staff impact as ECH installs the equipment and manages the community engagement. The community center's current air filtering includes MERV 8 followed by MERV 13, which captures larger particles like dust and pollen. And the MERV 13 is the minimum recommendation for wildfire smoke. So this would just kind of give us, it would be a study on knowing the air quality difference between the indoors of our facility and the outdoors. It would last about 1 to 2 years. And we could, they could either provide us all the data at the end for the interior, with either the data at the end, or we could request updates throughout the year. The outdoor monitoring would be live. We would be able to get that data into.
Are there currently outdoor air quality monitors located on the one that you have the public access to?
There's I think 3 purple air.
There are 3.
They're
already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Outdoor.
There are already 3 outdoor air quality monitors on Bowen that we can data from.
Yes.
Yeah, I can send the link up.
I'm not clear on what the benefit. I guess this is designated as an emergency operations center. This.
No, this would be a reception center. That's
Okay.
not in use.
Trying to determine why this is not an admin issue as opposed to an emergency.
So this would be where people would come if there's wildfire issues.
Exactly.
Okay. This would be a cooling center and it would also be
Okay.
wildfire smoke.
My first instinct is I'd like to see that plan before we start installing monitors, but I understand that the monitor thing might be time sensitive, and if there's no cost and very little staff time. Yeah, very little.
Yes.
That
Both myself and they would be very little else. They might have to show them where.
Anyone, what are the other committee members' thoughts on this?
Only concerned is what happens if we don't meet the MERV 13 stand.
Well, then we have a facilities team or person that needs to figure out what's wrong with our filters.
Exactly.
I don't
Like
think should
that's-
meet that
So
standard.
we should be meeting that standard, and that's what I would hope would come out of
And
this
that is
is
in
that
the contract for the building.
it goes MERV 8 and then MERV 13.
It's more like the filter company would be responsible for.
But yes, this building would serve as a reception center. It could serve as a polling center in emergencies and a clean air facility.
there's really no cost to doing, so. And this would be
$800 to install one yourself anyway, so we're not talking a high cost thing in the first place. As long as it doesn't take up a bunch of your time. Okay. Because you could install our own and save you a bunch of time. Yeah. Anyone else have opinions on this?
So the motion would be recommending that we join the UBC VCH community clean air spaces and air quality study.
That was the motion.
Make that motion.
Second.
Any opposition?
Is that a recommendation of the cultural council?
No.
You ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I hear more about this smoke event? I'm calling it a response plan, so it doesn't sound like a policy. Dawson, where's this?
I can send it to you. It was in response to an email.
No, what the CAO had said that he'd like to see a policy around our smoke response. Wildfires. Do you have the document already?
No, we don't have it.
And is this being added to your work list?
It would be added, this would be something that would be added to the work list.
Okay. So how would we
Which
know
is-
when you issue?
I mean, I'm assuming it would be issuing a notice on alertable that there's a air quality hazard because of wildfire smoke, but how do we know at what level to issue that?
I assume they would set different thresholds in the plan for different.
But do we have the measuring device available to tell us?
Yeah. And we would look at what other communities do in terms of what that threshold is, I think. Or look to basically for advice on financial.
And currently, right now, I just monitor the Environment Canada. They will issue warnings for smoke. So I would just put that out on our social media that there's smoke and how ways to mitigate that. And it could go out on, I don't know if you've done a smoke on the.
I don't think we need to. It's notify people that there's smoke in the air, like it's pretty obvious, it's a self-declaring emergency anyways, right? They should know that, but the plan, I imagine, would articulate the best places to communicate under different circumstances. External agencies roundtable, we're behind schedule now.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
No, don't be, it was very informative, thank you. BCM is not here today, or Gail hasn't joined us. Edward, anything else to add?
A note, we were at 65, volunteers.
Is that up or down?
It's down from the 91 before the insurance issue. What I've done is I've given all their volunteers the entire roster, so they can coordinate with other people. I've tried to encourage them to, really make this a neighborhood issue. Especially NERPs in adjacent neighborhoods. And as I said, hopefully I can become more active by October, September.
Well, thank you for everything you've done.
It's kind of fun.
You must enjoy it, you must. But. I know it can be thankless sometimes though, so appreciate it. Moving on to item 5.5. Services. Hi, I'm Jen, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know how formal these things are, but I'm Xerxes, the new planner one at the Muni, and so I'll just provide a quick update on the official plan. So the municipality is currently updating its official community plan along.
Could you speak up, please?
The municipality is currently updating its official community plan along with McElhaney, the consultants working for us. So our current OCP is about 14 years old right now, and we've just finished our first round of engagement, which ran from May 8th to June 9th. We had 2 events hosted by Max Maney, along with a lot more pop-up events hosted by staff and OCP steering committee volunteers. So by the end of the engagement, we had about over 500 plus responses for our online survey. Max Laney will now provide us with what we heard report to give staff and the OCP steering committee key themes from the data. And going forward, we'll start drafting our vision and goals of the OCP and fine tuning it to policies. We'll go into a second round of public engagement in the autumn once we have a draft SEP, draft policy. Yeah, and so we've had some first round of public engagement of lots of engagement on communities from people on phone, lots of enthusiasm from people we heard, and yeah, if you have any questions, I'll be doing my best to try to answer.
Do you have questions? I'm wondering how the committees are going to be engaged in the OCP update process, if at all. Particularly this committee, given the integration maybe, or the influence that OCP has on emergency response, emergency planning, fire smart, etc. So hoping that some of the concerns of the committee can be shared with that OCP update group, and looking to you to determine how best to do that.
I guess one of the things that's coming up from the committee has, at this point, not engaged with any specific groups. And I know that's been a question that has come up as to whether we should be engaging with specific groups. Some specific groups did make submissions, like I think the Conservancy did.
So is the recommendation that this committee makes a submission to the other committee, or?
Yeah, I'm just thinking. The OCP committee will, steering committee will be meeting on Wednesday. They spent a lot of time at the beginning of the process coming up with interest holder groups and talking about this. McElhaney doesn't have the scope
Yeah, okay.
to deal, so there are discussion on Wednesday is going to be how we can get that kind of focused feedback and somehow get it in through to the consultants without expanding the scope of work.
Okay.
Is that already on the agenda for
That's
Wednesday then?
Yeah,
So we don't need to ask today.
yeah. But it will be a challenge because they're already writing. So what we have been up to date encouraging them to do is to include like emergency planning concerns in the survey that was done.
So I'm looking to you, Steve, as like, in the immediate term, are you able to work on this, Erin? I don't want to direct Steve's work, that's not my role here, but like, how does this committee submit feedback? Because right now I'm hearing they're working on how, and it might happen in the future, but if they're writing a report now.
Well, one thing report we're getting on Wednesday, in my understanding, is the results of the survey.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, I thought I heard Steph say there's writing going on now.
Yeah, are we too late? Are we not too late?
They're gonna do they're gonna do what we
What we heard report.
heard before, and then, but they're not gonna be asking any more questions before they start drafting.
So that, is there time for more feedback, like from this committee?
There's not a ton of time in this phase. But I feel like if someone like Erin would have been, this came to staff, like there would have been the emergency planning concerns, ideally would have already.
So this went to the 2 staff members that are on this, 3 staff members that are on this committee. What was the result of that?
I'm just saying they were encouraged to contribute the data to the survey.
so as a person, not as a staff, like, so just as a member of the public, and it did not really. It didn't give an opportunity. So for Wednesday, thinking out loud here. For the development permit areas for wildfire that Steve mentioned it as one of the recommendations. I should draw that to everybody's attention.
I can provide you with a list of the things that are sort of top of mind, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, and then I guess the other is the built, building materials
Yes.
recommendation. One way in and one way out.
Water catchment possibly.
And, so you mean rainwater catchment or?
Yeah, I
Is
mean-
that covered in level C?
No, I mean, for, let's say, for new development, that you have 1,000 gallon tank for overhead, yes, that kind of thing.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I recall some discussion a number of years ago, Brian Biddlecombe wanted to, and I think we had a draft amendment to the land use bylaw or something about requiring overhead sprinklers. And I'm not sure that we could legally do that.
That's right.
So what we ended up doing is anytime we've got a rezoning, then you can put conditions on the rezoning. So for Cape Ranger Curtis, I think that was required for all the houses, but we can't do it as part of the building permit.
And I'm not even suggesting that we should concern ourselves with going over and above what's there now necessarily, like creating DPAs. But what I'd like to see is the parts of the OCP that are prohibiting us from doing things that are fire smart, for example, to be, removed or not included in the update. Or, the OCP.
I'm not sure, unless something's coming to your mind, I'm not thinking of anything right now. That prohibits.
I'm trying to sort of dig in the depths of my memory, but the lack of ring road, for instance, the intentional not putting ring roads in places is one of the things that was raised previously.
Yeah, and there was a discussion about Ring Road. And I think if I remember correctly, that the Ring Road went all the way around the island, not in development. So it's not prohibiting the two ways being made.
And I guess the Snow Cove design guidelines aren't part of the OCP discussion, are they?
They're part of the rezoning of the land use bylaw. They've just been updated.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So they're not included in that OCP. Yeah, okay.
I guess there could be general guidelines, but I think what you're looking for is more general guidelines. Maybe a policy or something that talks about following fire smart principles in building, things like that.
Or at least not encouraging the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. I know I had this, Telus has removed all those burnable trees that were beside their site. So that's good. All pine trees.
Any thoughts? Are we too late to get involved in the OCP engagement process? Not too late.
It's not gonna be, no. Again, there's gonna be more opportunities later when we actually have actual policies and feedback on what those policies could be.
Okay.
Right now, we don't have any policies or goals written yet, so.
So maybe it's a simple resolution. That the committee recommends to the OCP steering committee that principles or objectives be put in the OCP related to fire smart principles.
That emergency planning and response principles be included in OCP planning.
Yeah,
Fire smart.
Yeah, so let's add fire smart as a specific.
Okay.
Emergency planning and response principles be included.
The OCP update.
Specific and well as fire smart.
Right, just very specific.
Because emergency planning doesn't to me have anything to do with fire smart.
Emergency planning and response
You've got to
principles,
keep it
comma,
simple.
including fire smart, comma.
Yeah, but homeowners can be encouraged to do fire smart. But they can't necessarily.
I mean, the emergency program executive committee recommend to the official community plan steering committee that emergency planning and response principles, including fire smart, be included in the OCP update.
It's fine. Anyone?
Yeah, I like that.
So do I?
Anyone can move it, I feel like John wants to. So,
Move.
Move your
Second.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And oh yeah, all. Great. Thank you for your update. Appreciate the information. Pleasure to meet you. Okay, 6.1, new business on the back of time. New business. No,
We have that the emergency program executive committee resolved to provide support to and collaboration with Don Schaefer and his goal to include emergency planning content in the Bowen Island podcast. Emergency planning.
Say that again. That's the last bit. Provide support to and collaboration with Dawn and his goal to include emergency planning
Content.
Not to include, to do a podcast on.
Yeah.
Emergency evacuation, I think is what he was.
Yeah.
To
I think
do a.
my discussion with him was he want emergency resilience.
Yeah, it wasn't just about.
Yes,
Emergency resilience.
that was his word, but I
What is
don't
it?
know that.
Sorry, say it again, Ed?
He used, when he spoke to me about emergency resilience.
Okay, hold on a second.
Okay.
You just go back to this.
I mean,
Delegation.
Yeah.
Emergency planning.
Yeah, emergency planning. Planning and response. Yes.
So it's written in agenda, so we-
And I would also like, if we want me to. See. Smoke.
Let's do this and then. If everything to that. Okay.
I would support Don Schaefer in his podcast on emergency planning and wildfires. See.
With that.
Great. Cheers.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I-
Great. Unanimous.
Anonymous.
So Tessa's question, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
just support your chair here.
Mm-hmm.
She's wondering if she wants, do we need motions on those two items around AED policy and smoke response plan?
I guess if it falls outside of your work plan, so you guys vote on the work plan every year. So if it's outside of work plan, you would. And it depends on, the reason I like them is it's easy to find things. Like when is someone's podcast, I can just go find it via this. So do you want one? Do you feel more supported?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
do it.
and I can work on, I can put it on.
So we're
Okay.
seeking resolution on two more items. The first one would be that we ask the emergency program coordinator to create a short policy on AEDs in accordance with the advice received from legal, something like that.
Create.
Policy and place signs on device housing. That's good.
What do they use?
Like a party policy. You want me written?
And the second one is what?
That was, oh, the second one is a smoke response plan. Let's do set.
Works for me. Okay, so EPC create a policy document on AED use and maintenance and liability.
Of maintenance, use and maintenance. I don't, not use.
Yeah, just
Not use, just the
maintenance.
maintenance.
Maintenance. Policy, yeah. And a smoke response plan. Can you just put it together?
Yeah.
Wildfire smoke response, sure. Yeah.
Okay, that the EPC create a policy document on AED maintenance and a wildfire smoke response plan.
Right.
That's the counselor. Second.
Somebody second.
All right, Aaron.
All in favor? Aye. Great, so moved. Action items. It's a long meeting, sorry guys.
Really long meeting.
Really long meeting. Action items from the previous committee.
I didn't have them, I've got them here.
Great, thanks.
We got looking to Starlink done. We got report back to them on the EED payments from Rotary Club done. Provide a legal update on evacuation routes on private property done. our smart grant report to EPEC members by
That was done after the
email.
last meeting.
Advise on ownership and responsibility for the Minerva kiosk, done. Counselor Morris and legislation.
Okay, so my comment had nothing to do with qualified professionals. It was all to do with IGBs, which is Indigenous Governing Body. And the document I was looking at has disappeared off the website because they keep updating their emergency management website. And then the one that they had there before is no longer there. However, I'm a paper collector. So I happened to open up my emergency management binder last night. And what I was referring to was a statement on something that Bowen Ma, when she was minister, and a document that was published under her name. When the legislation receives royal assent, municipalities and regional districts will be required to contact Indigenous governing bodies and make reasonable efforts to reach agreement on the areas to be described in local authority emergency management plans for the purposes of consultation and cooperation. And I sent Steph the links to 2 documents that are now on the website. So we've got to engage with the IGBs. And so the first thing we got to do is, who are our IGBs?
I but
So-
sorry, I don't understand what the question is. What question are we trying to answer? right now?
Why have we engaged with, well, I was asking, have we identified the IGBs, and we got to do that?
Okay,
And the legislation's now been passed, and everything you read, we've got to engage them for the whole meal deal.
Yeah.
The plan, specified sites, and during an emergency and everything else. So first question is, have we identified who the IGBs are?
Yes, Squamish Nation,
Yeah.
is in its entirety, that's all, that's our only, Indigenous governing body that we need to reach out to. And I went, August 2024, last year, I went to, we had that grant that we received, some time ago for exactly this purpose, to, start the process of reaching out to Indigenous governing bodies.
so it's being done, we approved it, it's being done, and you know,
Yeah, so we,
dates of this.
yes, so the form that I went to last August was basically on how is this money supposed to be sent out? Because there was no guidance on how we were to accomplish these things. So what came out of that is basically to start with building relationships was the number one thing, which is why I started the paddle project. Actually, the paddle project idea came out of that forum. We had Squamish Nation emergency planning and response people within the group. So they are now meeting our groups at the final, which finale for the paddle project on June 24th. They have a new staff member, which is the person to contact regarding these types of communications. So we've been working on it as per the guidelines that we've received so far.
So there's 2 documents now on the website. One of them is entirely dealing with consultation with First Nations. But I guess in reading those, they're talking about, having an agreement as to what areas they're going to work. So we're not that far along yet. As to
No,
whether
we're
they even
not
want to be
integrating, we're not
involved.
integrating
Yeah.
agreements yet.
Or
We're not there yet.
how we're gonna involve them in the consultation.
And I mean, I would hope that a representative from the Squamish Nation Emergency Planning and Response would come into our EOC if we have an activation. If we don't, I have identified one of our staff members to be a First Nations liaison. So to make sure that that First Nations concerns are being considered in the operations phase in that section. So all decisions would be have that lens. And we're working towards getting to actual agreements, and where they want agreements, where they want to be involved is the next stage, is what.
And then there's the Squamish Nation elected council that you're dealing with.
I'm dealing with the Squamish Nation Emergency Planning and Response staff.
And they operate under the authority of the elected council.
Good. Action item, follow-up and discussion.
No outstanding action items.
And then one more, then the only one that came out of this meeting that I captured is to talk to the OCP, it's gone.
Talk to the
Touch base with the OCP, resolution now.
Yeah. So for new business, it's for action items, information items are included for information only, we will not be discussing those. Members of the public question period that I've seen members of the public. I'd like to, item 10, change our next meeting date.
Yes.
I apologize, I won't be here October 6th. So hoping we can do it a week prior to that.
Okay.
We'll work offline to reschedule that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a long way out.
Yeah, exactly, so just know that that is not. Unless the vice chair wants to, which is also an option, so stay tuned. Thank you everyone for your time and being this now.
Thank you.
Sorry about the long one.
Productive though.
It was, I thought it was.